Its wins at Wimbledon. However, Japan's fifth seed Kai Nishikori has had to pull out with a calf injury. It prevented him from playing his second round clash. Australian NBA player Matthew Dellavedovas received a qualifying offer from the Cleveland Cavaliers. And Australian Diamond star defender Julie Corletto's announced she'll retire from netball after next month's World Cup. Now to the FiveAA forecast, and a morning shower or two, heading for 15 after an overnight low of 8. Friday partly cloudy, 14, a possible showers Saturday, 16, mostly sunny and 15 for Sunday, then showers returning on Monday, 16. More news as it happens on FiveAA.
$13.95, Adelaide's FiveAA. This is Peter Godfrey.
6 minutes past 5, 10 degrees still. As Kendall said, 8's the expected minimum. Maybe we'll get to there as the sun comes up. Maybe we won't. We'll have to wait and see. Let's see how it is over the ditch. Selwyn Manning joins us now, editor of EveningReport.nz. Selwyn, how's your side of the ditch this morning?
Yeah, not too bad, Peter. Probably temperatures look like they'll be settling in around about 12 to 14 degrees here in Auckland. There's a bit of a high, and overnight it was cooler than it has been the last few days, probably down to around about 5.
Okay.
But we can see signs of spring. If only the sparrows are kind of showing that a little bit more interest in each other, if you know what I mean.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yeah. The birds and the bees kind of thing.
Yeah, sorting out their potential friends for the seasons coming ahead, and no doubt there'll be a little bit of nest building coming along. So that's always encouraging at this stage in the winter.
I think so. Yes, absolutely. Next thing we know, we'll be seeing the blossoms coming out on the trees, and then we'll be complaining about how hot it is.
And we'll all be writing poetry.
Yes.
It'll be wonderful as we sing along toward Christmas.
Nicely put. All right, let's talk a couple of political issues this morning. First, in regard to state-owned housing in New Zealand, public housing with, what's happening here? A change in the law regarding who can authorise the selling off of state houses.
Yeah, that's exactly it. National-led government here is moving to create this law that will allow at least 2 cabinet ministers the authority to directly sell off state houses. Now, the law, in effect, that what it does, Peter, is it blurs that line between political governance and the positions that the ministers so that they can, it kind of positions those ministers so they can specifically direct officials and manage the sale process. Now, remember, there's a constitutional divide that exists for politicians when they become government, that they cannot really, in essence, they can give the policies and things like that for the public officials to do their job and, to manage within the scope of those kind of policies, etc. The governance aspect is that's always been observed. Now, what they're doing here is creating a law so that they can basically say, right, no, we want you to sell that block of land. We want you to sell it to that group of people or that private enterprise, that business or that offshore interest. So it's directly, it's directing. The law will make it, give them the ability to direct the outcome, which is something, and in specifics, which is something quite different. Now, critics like Labour...
Sorry, just on that, so you're saying rather than, putting it out to tender or take the best offer or anything like that, or some sort of a treaty, it'll be, okay, well, that person is going to buy it, that organisation that's raised an interest.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it would be like your own premier, instead of, governing the whole show, basically going along and saying, okay, we've got a policy now that we're going to flog off all of these particular assets. Now, that asset there is going to be sold to that group of businesses across there on the left there.
Okay.
And so what the critics are saying, including, obviously the Labour Party would be against this. Now, its housing spokesperson, Phil Twyford, he says the Nationals' controversial legislation, as he says it, places ministers above the law. But he goes further than that, and he says that the bill is basically, in the quote here, a charter for corruption.
Okay.
And he says at a time when ministers are planning to hock off billions of dollars of public assets. And the quote here again, National wants the power to do dirty deals, flogging off billions of dollars worth of land and housing, and it doesn't want to be bothered with pesky public servants or the rule of law, end of quote. And that's that illustration there about if you had your politicians kind of sitting there and saying, okay, that asset there will be sold to that group of people or that business, etc., etc. You can see where the corruption can creep in.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the concern that this law creates. And there has been no law like this in New Zealand statute books leading up to now. It's really quite a different thing. Now, the backstory to this, Peter, is the Nationals are really struggling to create a market for up to 8,000 state houses. Now, remember, the housing prices in New Zealand, and particularly in Auckland, are at traditional highs and are continuing to increase. So there's big money for a government that has an ideology that sells off assets. Now housing stock is seen as, a big, big money turner if they go into this kind of thing. So, but it's been struggling to kind of find the transition between state housing and government-backed provision of state housing, giving people the right to be able to progress through their lives through a state house kind of system, reach their potentials arguably with reducing the housing costs, giving them more opportunity to have a disposable income that will make their lives better, etc., etc. Now, that transition toward making sure that the public sector that may purchase those houses will honour that kind of mandate is where the challenge is. So the government came up with this and spoke on your program a little while ago about it. The social housing providers is what they're talking about. Now, if a company, business or an NGO wants to purchase the state houses, the government has said it needs to register as a social housing provider. Once it does that, it basically can buy them and do whatever it likes. It also gets government subsidies by way of the tenancy reductions for the tenants and things. So the flow of money basically goes straight to them, and the opportunity for them to make pretty decent profits is obviously there. The Prime Minister, John Key, and the Finance Minister, Bill English, over the last week, they've really been on the back foot for admitting that they're keen also to sell off these state houses to overseas interests. And an Australian organisation, Horizon, came into the frame on this one. Both Key and English said they're absolutely comfortable with reports that were detailing how the Australian housing provider Horizon was well positioned to buy up to 500 New Zealand state houses. Also, revelations that the profits from those purchases, there would be no restriction on the profits being sent back to Australia HQ. Okay. And so that caused quite a concern, as you imagine if it was the same, in Australia with its New Zealand interests.
Or we have concerns about, Chinese interests buying property or other overseas. So I understand.
So that flow of capital is one that is an ongoing concern there. Now, the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, so Key in English, they're saying, no, they're absolutely comfortable with that situation. And so that got a response right across the country, really, and even the New Zealand Herald, which is what I'd say ideologically agnostic generally, criticised the government's encouragement of this purchase, meaning the one to Horizon. And the quote here from the Herald was John Armstrong, who's one of their key writers at the Herald, and he said it's perilously close to allowing blind ideology to get the better of political common sense, end of quote. So that gives an indication really of the mood as we watch the Nationals now in full stride, Peter, toward really what they've been building up to since 2008 when they came into power. They really have been positioning, if you watch their politics over those years, to a point where they feel, okay, we're going to go for broke now, and it looks like they've reached that line, Peter.
Okay, maybe they're taking a leaf out of the our government, our state government, who have been. I don't think they've got anything else left to sell off. Well, that's the common issue that's raised. Interesting. So we'll have to see what happens there. So will they get that law through? They've got the numbers. They get the law through.
Yeah, they'll get the numbers. They need the assistance from. At least the ACT Party with Party of One. So they'll get that through, and no doubt United Future would come on board with an MP of One. That would get them over the line. They've also got the Māori Party that supports them on most things. There's a certain amount of benefit, perhaps, for the tribes that are working in the corporate sector. To benefit from becoming the social providers, and in some ways it fits into the overall plan of many in Māori to take responsibility for their own social provision.
Yeah, okay.
So this provides an opportunity for that. So in some quarters, they can see benefits to this.
Yep.
The other problem is that really the big conundrum on this is that how would I put this? That the New Zealand social safety net, I guess, is something here that's being deconstructed. Its welfare kind of system, if you like, its framework, it's being deconstructed. This disinvestment, if you like, of governance responsibilities to the country's people is right at the heart of that. Now, those responsibilities that come with social provision, meaning state house provision, etc., they've long obviously been the burden of particularly centre-right governments that have kept it going in the past. Now, this government is obviously reversing that and exiting from having the responsibility to govern such provision. That's the high-end kind of area, where people who watch politics particularly closely are most concerned about, that this is a big change here. It's a radical change, and if the plan concludes or exhausts itself, either way, the private sector that has invested in this whole new market that is being created, will they honour that, the morality basically that comes with the responsibility, and will they honour that above the profits that they can make? And so that's the question, I guess, the same in South Australia State and others in Australia, that when state assets have been sold off, assets that have been built by our parents' generations and those before that, for a particular purpose, does the private sector honour the purpose of why they were built in the first place?
Common question, indeed.
So, that's at the heart of what's happening here in New Zealand, pretty much like a lot of what has gone on in South Australia with sell-offs and things like that. New Zealand's already been thrashed down to the bone by previous governments in that respect. So there's, I guess, where the Herald is going here and saying, it's saying this is blind ideology over common sense politics, is it's indicating that it believes that there's a tipping point that the government has gone over, that it's gone beyond what would be considered sustainable from the Kiwi way kind of thing, the fabric of the interaction between government and its people.
Indeed. Just quickly, so a little faux pas from our state opposition leader in regard to a couple of your leaders. I don't know whether this has come across your news services over there. Stephen Marshall is our Liberal leader, the opposition leader. I think it was in his budget reply speech, said that he looked to New Zealand's economy as inspiration for his vision of South Australia's future, describing your economy as a powerhouse. But he then referred to your Prime Minister, the Honourable John English. Apparently he'd met your Finance Minister, Bill English, a couple of days before, so that was where the confusion came. But
there was a bit of a morph between the two, the power of two, not the power of one.
That's
Maybe there's something in that. But certainly the dominant faction in the national government here is controlled by Bill English and another man called Stephen Joyce. And there are some who argue that our esteemed Mr. Key is this merely the populist vehicle that delivers
the smiling face,
the public support. So maybe he's onto something there. Just one word of caution: New Zealand was touted by one of the significant banks that have invested in New Zealand only about a year ago as the rock star economy. Now that rock star economy is now being questioned as to whether or not it kind of skipped the getting drunk stage of the rock star trajectory and went straight to the hangover. So I'd just say have a closer look. Might be the wise thing to do for the Liberals.
Yeah, indeed. So we'll just have a quick break and we'll come back and talk about a former Prime Minister of yours and what she's planning or what she's hinting, perhaps. We'll be right back. Selwyn Manning's with us, editor of EveningReport.nz.
5AA Breakfast.
Let's head across Netta Police Media and have a chat to Dave Muir. Hi, Dave.
Jane, if you get any more hassles from your two colleagues there about Port Adelaide, by all means, don't hesitate to give us a call.
Oh, Dave, are you a supporter?
Well, I'm actually waiting to refresh my taser training. So
David Penberthy, Mark Aston and Jane Riley for breakfast. Back Monday, July 13 on 1395, Adelaide's 5AA.
Marge, what are you doing all the way over here by yourself?
Sorry, dear?
I said, why are you sitting here on your own?
Oh, yes, thank you.
No, why are you here by yourself?
What was that?
Sitting here alone? On your lonesome?
Sorry, dear.
Oh, don't worry. I've got to get back.
First you lose your hearing, then you lose your friends. For your free copy of Australia's only independent guide to hearing aids, call Connect Hearing on 1300 186 536 or go to our website and start Connect Hearing today.
Been dreaming about a new modern kitchen? Soft close drawers, granite bench tops, a splashback, new handles? It's not as expensive as you think. Rather than buy a completely new kitchen, Dream Doors can transform your old one with an exciting facelift. Say goodbye to drawers that jam, peeling doors and old appliances. Create a brand new look and feel with no compromise on quality, choice and design. Your dream kitchen for a whole lot less. Check out dreamdoors.com.au or call 1-800-DREAM-DOORS for a no obligation quote.
Peter Godfrey on 1395, Adelaide's FiveAA.
And Selwyn Manning, editor of EveningReport.nz, is with us, talking some of the news from New Zealand. Now, Selwyn, you mentioned a little while ago, your former Prime Minister Helen Clark was possibly eyeing off the top job in the United Nations when the current Secretary General Ban Ki-moon steps down. She's dropped a few more hints in that direction?
Yeah. Now, Helen Clark is over here in New Zealand, and she certainly a couple of nights ago, Peter, in an interview with the New Zealand Herald's Audrey Young down in Wellington, hinted very strongly that she is interested in the position, which is confirming a lot of us who have been watching her positions at the United Nations. Now, currently, Helen Clark is the head of the United Nations Development Programme, or UNDP, as it's often referred to as, and she's certainly in that top 5 power position in the whole of the UN apparatus, and her support and her engagement around the world has been demonstrated. Really how we got to know Helen Clark, in a sense that she was always very eager to go to the places where the problems or issues or challenges existed and to solve those kind of things. So we could, and also Helen Clark's ambitions are always, for the top. Yeah. And her whole career, her whole political career, from being a young woman right to now, has always been that way. Now, what she said to the New Zealand Herald, and Audrey Young, no-nonsense kind of person, Audrey, and she just straight question, are you interested in, the Secretary-General's job at the United Nations, was the question kind of thing. And Helen Clark said, and quote here, well, it's still relatively early days. The Secretary-General is 3.5 years into a 5-year term, and normally the issue wouldn't be resolved until well into the 5th year. So let's say there's a lot of shadow boxing at the moment. Okay. End of quote. Now, that's typical Helen Clark speak, for saying, I'm in the frame, I'm interested, there's all the machinations going on at the moment. She's saying that obviously the role will be resolved, meaning someone will be appointed to the role by way of the General Assembly in by the end of 2016. So that's next year, and clearly the shadow boxing, as she refers to, is trying to win the favours, if you like, of people that are in powerful positions all around the world, particularly in the developing nations, but also significantly, obviously, Australia would be virtually, called on in this respect if she begins campaigning in the open. Certainly the United States, Britain, etc., etc. Now, the other thing in this whole space too, which may show that New Zealand has its credentials on the global stage in such a multilateral environment as the UN, is the New Zealand ambassador, our permanent representative, as they refer to him as, at the United Nations. Now he takes over as the presidency temporarily, as countries do, at the United Nations Security Council. Now that brings in a whole heavy weight of responsibilities, obviously, as you'd imagine, but also over this side of the ditch, the Nationals and government here have been quite significantly criticised for being asleep at the wheel since our country was voted on as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. We haven't heard much of what New Zealand has been doing with that opportunity since it took the seat at the Council around the beginning of this year. Some are kind of now starting to think, well, maybe the government has listened, because in the last few days, this whole for all of our lives, Peter, haven't we? You know, with the issue relating to Israel and the Palestinian territories has always been at the heart of the world's conflicts, and that in the Middle East, and certainly it's always been a concern for most people in that area. Now, Murray McCully, our foreign minister, has been positioned, I should say. I wouldn't say he's put his hand up to take this, but he's been positioned to be a point man for the latest attempts globally to get the leaders of Israel and Palestine back to the table for peace talks. And in past times, in certain conflicts around the world, when there is the opportunity to get people around the table, New Zealanders have been used as, what they do is they brand the people as honest brokers and place them into that type of thing. People with no vested interest in the outcome, perhaps apart from peace. And New Zealand, just like Australians, you know, we're seen in a different way, perhaps, to some of those from the Northern Hemisphere. And that's what's happening at the moment. So that kind of thing, you can see, you know, Helen Clark would obviously be seen as a strong leader and an administrator, quite different to Ban Ki-moon, would certainly, you know, get to the crisis points around the world. That's her style, whereas Ban Ki-moon tends to issue a statement, I suppose, and that's not being too unfair. So all of this is what's going on in New Zealand at the moment. Suddenly the country is waking up to that foreign affairs as, you know, a significant part of what we do, and there's a lot of chatter around that, Peter.
Benjamin, because there was speculation Kevin Rudd was keen on that big top position too, so that would be an interesting showdown. If that was, I don't know what the current situation. He was denying it at one point, but there was speculation. So
one of the things, you know, that, like, as a New Zealander, one of the things would go against, from my view, you know, I might just say it from my view here, against Kevin Rudd would be the disintegration of the Labor Party's opportunities.
Yes,
and,
for sure.
You know,
for sure.
With a multilateral organisation, what they're looking obviously for is a very stable, firm hand on the tiller, but one that isn't going to be divisive amongst the various factions, of which we know in the UN there are many.
Yeah, and so Helen Clark would stand out on that case, you know, as a strong contrast to Kevin Rudd.
She would.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, Selwyn, pleasure talking with you as always. Thank you for your time this morning. Have a great week, and we'll catch up with you again next week.
Thank you again.
All the best. Bye-bye. Selwyn Manning, editor of EveningReport.nz. Time is just coming up to 28 minutes past 5. Anne Stone with all the latest news, sport and weather, and then more of your calls on 822 300 000.
Well, they say a man's home is his castle, but finding the dream home to call your castle is not always that easy.
Tell him he's dreaming.
Real Estate Radio is here to help. Join me, Leith Forrest, and a host of real estate experts from Toop and Toop as we help you make sense of the market.
Real Estate Radio, brought to you by Toop and Toop. For everything real estate, talk to a Toop. 8362 8888.
Thursday nights from 7 on 1395, Adelaide's FiveAA.
If you drive a truck for a living, you know exactly how costly a breakdown can be. Don't gamble on cheap parts and labour when you can have quality parts fitted by expert technicians, guaranteed. Right now, if you run a P, G or R Series Scania, they will remove and replace your clutch for $2,695 without retarder or $2,995 with Scania's increased linings, you'll get up to 40% extra life. And you can save 10% on all other repairs. Scania Trucks at Wingfield. Top mechanical servicing without the top price.
Hello. Frank Walker from National Tiles. Our 3 all-new National Tiles Adelaide showrooms and warehouses have only been open since the 1st of June, and already the response has been absolutely amazing. Builders, tilers, architects, interior designers, and people building or renovating their own homes